Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. Thank you so much for being here today. Brooke and I have someone very special here and an author that we are so excited to dive into this book. And before we even get into that, we want to bring on our guest, Sapna Radhakrishnan. Welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. It's always so much fun talking to you.
It really is. We love you. You're such a warm presence. We met Sapna at an event, which I feel like all of our guests lately are from this event. It was an awesome event. And we were talking about how we had Shefali on, and you were saying she's a mentor of yours. She's been someone that you've followed, and learning more about your background, that you're trained in NLP, you're an author, you're a parent yourself, writing this book. You are the perfect person to write it. Yelling to Zenning, how transforming ourselves leads to raising conscious and resilient children. Thank you for writing this book. It's amazing.
Yes, all the things I did wrong is out there, and my son is going to hold it up against me for all of our lifetimes now.
Well, I think what's great about it is when you're reading a book like this, when you're thinking about parenting, when you're thinking about how to work on yourself in the midst of this, having examples and having stories, I think is really important, because I would read some of the tips that you would say, but then you would show how it could apply in life, or you would give an example of how you messed up and then how you fixed it now, which I think is such a vulnerable and humble thing to do, but it was really beneficial. So I would love for our listeners just to know a bit more about you as a person and what kind of led you to writing this book.
Growing up, like every family, we all have those ups and downs, right? But I'm a sensitive child. I was a very sensitive kid. So I would absorb all the tensions and anxieties of my parents. And I didn't know what was happening. I felt helpless. I felt like there was no language. Even if my mom would come and ask me what's going on, I didn't have the language to tell her what was happening within me. And it was frustrating for me, and it was frustrating for her, because we would not understand each other for some reason. And fast forward that, I could see the same thing happening when I had my son. He was really young though, but I was getting flustered and upset for every little thing. There was no language to even express. Like, the way I explain it now to my clients is, let's say you have a headache, right? You have a headache, but you don't know what to call it. You don't know to say it's a headache, or you don't know to say it's a pain here in this part of the body. But something is wrong, you know this, but you don't know how to explain, you don't have the language for it. Imagine how that would feel. But the moment I say, Andrea, Brooke, I have a headache, boom, you understand what that word is. You know what it means. You would be like, oh yes, Sapna, just take a medicine, grab a Tylenol, you're going to be fine. There's an instant connection because you know how to help me. I know how to communicate. You see how it is? Mm-hmm. But it's the same. But what's happening was all these emotions, and we don't know how to communicate. I needed to learn this new language. First, so that I feel power within me. Second, I didn't want to repeat the pattern. I could see that starting off very early with my son. And I was like, okay, I need to figure this thing out. Otherwise, I'm going to mess it. That's how the journey started for me to start reading into parenting, learning about parenting, learning communication skills. And it became so much fun. So each time you understand, you know what's happening within you. And then you can see that projected onto others too. And it's so much fun sometimes when you can help somebody with it. I mean, not to take away whatever they're going, but when you understand, there's instant connection. It's easier to help others too. Mm-hmm. That's how it started. And now I'm like, okay, let's learn this. Okay, I don't know how to do this. Let's learn. I'm a learner. If I don't know something, I figure it out. Mm-hmm. That's been one of my most helpful traits that's helped me.
I think there's one thing about like learning though, and then applying it and then being able to teach it, mm-hmm. which I think is your gift, because I know you've helped so many parents when they hit these roadblocks, when they feel like they're stumbling, when they feel like there's something wrong. And you used a really important word there, which is projecting. And you talk about a lot about that in the book. And I think that's really important, whether you're a parent or not, to know how your experience, how you're projecting that into the world, or you're using your own experience to tailor your child's experience. And so reading your book, I learned so much about, oh my gosh, I do this all the time. Like I had a messy house. So I'm like really particular about how my house is because I don't want my kids to have that same experience, like as an example. And then I obsess over it and then becomes a thing, and it can hinder connections sometimes because I'm so fixated on them not having the same experience that I had. So I would love for you to talk about how our own experiences affect how we project onto our children.
Oh yeah, and I write about this in the book too. When I was growing up, this is a great story, Like I hope people can relate to this. So my mom was a working mom, always, like in a rush, and she is busy, like we all are. And what would somebody who has to rush off to work? My dad used to travel a lot, so she was like a single mom raising two small children, going off to work, and she didn't drive, so she had to take the public transport. That took longer than normal, and she had to drop us off at school and all the stuff. So she would pack lunches for us, the basic lunch, peanut butter sandwich, and I would take that. And in my experience, my classmates all had stay-at-home moms, and they would put, like fancy stuff, or they would bring it. They would bring it during lunchtime, and they would have warm lunches. Might seem so simple, but I was like, every time I opened my lunchbox, it was the same old peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter sandwich. And I was like, I would trouble my mom. Why can't you make me something fancy for once? And she tried. She did, my mom, poor thing. But then she would get exhausted and she would go back to the same old peanut butter. Now, in my experience, it was like, oh, why do I have to bring the same old thing? And my friends are bringing all these fancy lunches. Fast forward, when I would pack lunch for my son, I had this in my subconscious. Oh, I didn't want my son to feel what I felt. So I would put this extra time in packing his lunches, these gourmet lunches, big, huge lasagnas and fancy sandwiches. And I would pack them beautifully and send them off. They would come back half eaten or not eaten. And I would blow my lid off. I'm like putting all this effort, and this child is not even eating. And very innocently, my son would be, oh, I didn't have the time, or he was chatting with his friends. He just wanted a peanut butter sandwich and hang out with his friends. But in my head, because I didn't want him to feel left out or like, why is his lunch like that? I would put this extra effort, this extra time, which I didn't have. I had to rush to work in the morning, but I would wake up earlier to pack his lunch. In my head, it was a huge thing, but he didn't care. So I had to pause and look at this because it was happening more often than not. I had to pause. So two things would have happened at that moment. Either he would have developed an eating disorder where he would stuff his food to impress me, or he would start lying. He might throw his lunch and he might come and tell me, I ate my lunch. One of these two might happen. So I had to catch myself. So what I did was I wrote in big red letters and pasted it on the refrigerator. Do not put so much effort in the lunchbox and get mad at your son. So every time I opened in the morning, I remembered, okay, he just wants a simple, a sandwich, and I shouldn't be bothered if it gets thrown away. He knows his body and he will stop when he's full. So this is an example of one of those projections that we put on our child. They don't want all that. They don't want our fancy lunches. They don't want, all the design and frills and fluff. They just want a simple sandwich. And if you have a child like me, then it takes a conversation, a conversation. I wish my mom would have come and told me, I'm so sorry, I don't have the time. I know how much you love those fancy lunches that you want to share with your friends. How about this? How about on a Sunday brunch, we can cook together and make something? I wish my mom had those tools to tell me those words. That's all I needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that example. And I think it's a beautiful example of how all of this work when it comes to conscious parenting is about ourselves. So I'm not a parent yet, but I can understand, okay, I got some things I want to work on and turn inward on me first so that I don't have to project. And these agendas that we have for what it should be, kind of the blame and the shame, it all comes from taking ownership of what is going on in my subconscious. So I'd love for you to speak on that, of how this work is really about working on ourselves.
Yeah. And we are so unaware of all this we are carrying from our past, our conditioning, our belief systems, the wounds which we might have carried from the past, the frustrations, the annoyance, and the anger which comes out as yelling, or we suppress that and it shows up as some sort of illnesses in our body, which is something to look into, right? And when we pause in the areas that is not working, that's showing us constantly. The universe is showing us constantly the areas that is not working. Are you getting tired a lot? Are you falling sick a lot more than normal? Are you feeling out of control, like you're not able to draw boundaries with your children or with your spouse or anybody? All those areas are showing us in what ways we need to heal. All we need to do is pause and look at it. This is not working. This seems out of ordinary. I'm falling sick more than normal. I'm yelling at my child more than needed, or I'm not able to convey what I need to say. I'm not able to draw those boundaries. I feel helpless. I feel like somebody's taking advantage of me. All these areas are showing us how we need to look into those areas and heal. So I'm usually very, very curious. Why aren't people looking into those areas? We know these areas are not working, but there's so much hesitation into doing that work. So before I talk about why, what do you see in your practices? Why do you think people don't want to look into those areas or do the work?
I think it's vulnerable. I think it opens wounds that you
don't want to open.
You don't want to open. Yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think also there's part of it that's kind of denial, right? That you even have a problem. You can blame it on, because your kid's throwing a tantrum. You can blame the problem on their throwing a tantrum, right? I think, and it's a vulnerable thing to go back into your childhood or to go back into thinking about what you could own and change, because it requires work. It requires maybe talking to someone or opening up when you might not feel like you're ready to do that, or you don't know how to do that. You've never done it before.
A metaphor I like to use is when you have a splinter in your foot, it's painful, but we are so scared of the tweezer that's going to pull it out. We get stuck with that splinter all our life. The tweezer might hurt a little, but it's out of your way. But if we are so used to having the splinter in your feet, you don't know what life is going to be without that. So that can block us. Like I said, we are so scared of the work, the tweezer that's going to pull it out. We're like, no. In our head, it's bigger, right? When we see the tweezer coming or when we see that needle pointing at us, we're like, we know it's healing. We know we're going to get through this. But that needle or the tweezer seems so big in our head that we don't do the work.
What are some examples in your work with clients of those tweezers, of when they removed that barrier, when they did the work, it helped them heal?
Yeah. Suddenly they're not as reactive. They pause. Oh, yeah. Isn't this pattern we spoke about? It's showing up now. Oh, yeah. This is the moment Sapna told me. This is the moment we are working on. And they pause. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but the pause is being introduced in the relationship. From that place of pause, you suddenly have choice. You don't have to react the same way you reacted before. You're like, okay, I can walk out of the room. I can say, can we circle back? I can be creative and say, let's do it this way. Oh, that's interesting. You think about it this way. How about that way? There's so many. The door just opens up in that moment of pause. That is the work we need to do.
Yeah, you talk about the conscious pause and neutrality, right? So in this moment, my daughter's son is screaming at me. I'm going to pause because you can overpower and puff your chest. You are bigger and do have more power as the parent technically. But if you want a pattern to change, you have to disrupt the pattern. And so when you talk about that conscious pause and the power in that, like you said, it does give you more choices. And so I don't know. I had this experience last night where I was like, I paused. I literally channeled your book and I thought about what she's doing is not a reflection of me right now. What she's doing is she's just experiencing a big emotion and a big feeling. And I think that's a big reason why people don't do this work, because we're uncomfortable with feelings or experiencing somebody else's big feelings. And so there's so much power in that pause and breathing through it and not reacting in that moment. And so what are some tools that you give people when they're trying to disrupt that pattern? Like, I know that you have some steps in the book of awareness and kind of how to get through this, but how do you help people get through that really uncomfortable time when your kid or spouse or partner is having a big feeling experience and it makes us uncomfortable?
We all have this power, and we all have done this sometime in our life. Your boss, your coworker, your neighbor, your friend who's like annoying you, a relative, a cousin. We all do this. We pause. We're like, okay, I can't say, if I say something right now, this is going to blow bigger than it has to be. And we pause. We all have done this. So we have the power, first of all. But with children, somehow we don't exercise this power. It becomes very reactive because these are small beings and we are more powerful. We don't exercise that, but we all have it. What if we use the same strategy here, where we pause? We are like, okay, and think about the bigger picture. You see, in that moment, we are not thinking, but when you step back and see the bigger picture, those little moments, like those tiny drops of water, create that mighty ocean. Those tiny moments are what are going to create your memories on the long run. When you zoom out and see those moments you've had with your child, how do you want them to remember it? First thing, having the intention. Why do you want to do the work even? Because how do you want your Thanksgiving dinner to be when you're 70 years old and you have your children over? How do you want those conversations to go by when you're having a cup of coffee with your child? Having those pictures will give you the reason for you to act first. Mm-hmm. Then, if that picture is enticing enough, you will start practicing. Doesn't mean it's perfect. We can't do it perfect all the time. But the times when we do fall back, you become aware. Okay, what was that I couldn't do last time? I'm going to implement it this time. Like, for example, I had big lash outs with my son. It was huge. I would scream on top of my lungs. Once I started doing the work and start becoming aware of this, what I started doing was I would hug myself and say, okay, it's coming, it's happening. I feel this big outburst coming at you. It's not about you. I want you to step away. And I would feel these emotions and I would hug myself and say, okay, I feel like screaming right now. Step away from me. And as I kept doing it, it started fading away. It became lesser and lesser. And the gaps between my outbursts became, longer and longer. If I had an outburst every day, it became once a week and shorter, and once in 2 weeks and shorter still. And that's what happens. And even now, once in a while, I do yell at him. It's not like, I don't, but it doesn't have that intensity as before. And I've told him just over and over again, when I'm having this outburst, just think Mama is sick. She's going through something. It's not about you, because Gabor Mate, one of my mentors, always told us that when a child has these experiences, when the parent is yelling and screaming, it's almost impossible for a young child to say, my parent loves me, but at this moment they're having a hard time. Mm-hmm. They make it about themselves. Mm-hmm. They say, oh, something must be wrong with me that my parent is mad at me. So I was very, very aware of that notion. And it takes a whole lifetime for us to convince, a child, no, it's not about you. or convince ourselves, my parents' reactions was not about me. I would constantly tell him, just think mama is sick, she has a fever, she's not feeling well. And now that he's a bit older, I say, just think she has her period.
I think the rule of don't take anything personally.
Yeah.
Like the sooner we can learn that and adopt that is so much better. And I also think too, as I'm practicing that, it allows me to have a calmer nervous system because you're not getting so agitated. Living in the present moment, the power of the pause, that is something that we train ourselves day after day. It's the power of meditation, the power of stillness, of breath, all of these things that whether you're a parent or not, you're going to benefit from having a calm nervous system. Right? You talk about the importance of chasing meaning instead of success. Again, I think a parent or not, that is so powerful when we can live in the moment. We can think about, okay, what is the meaning I'm attaching to this story? That is huge. So I'd love for you to speak on that.
Yeah. The job of our brain is to give a meaning to everything. What does it mean? This person made a face at me. What does it mean? This person is speaking loud at me, towards me. What does it mean? What does everything mean? It has to give a meaning for it to feel safe. But as a child, those meanings are so fast and quick, and it's not checked. It's not double checked. It's not verified. So it could make up a variety of meanings. For example, let's say a child comes excited running to the dad or a mom, and the parent is busy. And they go in and say, Mom, Dad, look at my report card. I got an A+, or whatever they're excited about, their sports or something. And the parent is busy and says, not right now. I'll get back to you. It happens one time. Maybe another day, the child goes running in and says, oh, I made a goal. And the parent says, can't you see I'm busy? I'll talk to you later. Okay, maybe it happens one more time. The child is making a meaning. Oh, my parent doesn't like me when I'm excited, or my parent is not interested in my achievement, whatever those meanings are. And now it takes a lifetime to understand why I don't get excited, or why I don't show excitement when I achieve something, or why am I not so driven towards achievement, whatever that is. Because it's showing up, right, in your life. That maybe your boss is saying, why aren't you achieving your goals? And you're like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Because it's also subconscious. We have to bring the thing that is in our subconscious to the conscious mind, and then we fix it. That's what happens when we do the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think having a coach or a therapist or someone that's trained in this, like you're trained in NLP, neurolinguistics programming, which is so powerful. We've had coaches that are trained in this, and it is understanding this deeper level. And I think to know what that is and what's happening in your brain or where these things come from, I think you really need a trained professional to help you. Where that's why you're so valuable for parents to understand these things. And so I want people to know where, I have more questions for you, but I want people to know where to find you when they're thinking about this subconscious work. And like, I wonder what is under the surface here. What is she talking about? Maybe even just have a couple calls with you. How would people contact you, and what would working with you look like?
Yeah, they can reach out to me through my website or social media. Yeah, definitely they can DM me. And I have a free one-on-one call, like a discovery call. They can book on my website, which is sapnarad.com. And my Instagram handle is Sapna Rad Coaching.
Okay. I just wanted to plug that because I feel like if I was listening to this, I'd be like, you know what? I'm curious. Like, what is it that's coming up over and over? What are these patterns? It's coming from the subconscious, right? But I'm too busy to try to uncover this myself, and maybe somebody else could help me. And so I think when people are drawn to you and they can feel your warmth, they're going to want to know how to find you. So we'll plug that in our show notes. But what I keep thinking about in this conversation is the separateness, being able to separate yourself from your kids, right? Like, they are not you. They might have characteristics of you. They might have a similar interest that you did or whatever, but they are not you. It is separate. And when we're thinking again about meaning and success, I know something you wrote in the book is helping your kids, instead of aiming for success or aiming for money or the accolades, that can kind of be damaging sometimes. More thinking about the meaning, what comes easy to you, what do you love to do, how could you help people, and how could you get paid for that? And I thought that was so powerful, that reframe of thinking of success is, whatever we have programmed in our mind that we're pushing onto our kids, versus how do they find meaning, and coaching them that way, because they are separate from you. They do have a different dreams and aspirations and callings. And so I would love for you to talk about the importance of them finding meaning that way, instead of pushing our version of success on them too.
That's a great question. And, the way they can find the meaning is through connecting to themselves. What brings them joy? What makes them, bring that sense of, the sense of joy in whatever they are doing, constantly bringing their attention back to themselves. What we do is, see, we all have good intentions. We love our kids. We want the best for them. We want to see them achieve the best. Even when we feed them, we want to bring them the most nutritious, most healthy. We want them to be full. But in that intention, we don't see the child. Like if the child is full, we push the child to have one more bite. We say, oh, grab one more bite, make a happy plate. But what if we paused and made the child get in touch with the body? You feel full right now? Okay, done. Take the plate off. But somehow, because we are so attached or we are so connected, not in that connection form, but we see our identities connected, we think if the child didn't eat, it is somehow a reflection on our parenting, on what we are feeding. If we separated that and we just saw the child, oh, you're full, we take the plate away. You're painting, you love those colors, don't you? You love, oh, your flower is so big or so colorful or so orange, bringing that their awareness back to their feeling. Like if somebody's practicing or playing the piano beautifully, instead of saying, oh, that sounded so beautiful, I see how much you must have practiced to be able to play so beautifully. I see how much you love the piano. Whatever, bringing that attention back to themselves. I notice that you get lost when you are coloring a flower or a dragon. I see how much you love to bake. Bringing that attention to how they are feeling when they're doing an activity. I see that you're frustrated with this activity. Tell me more about it. We can do that only when we separate ourselves from our child. It's very difficult to do if not. Because if you see your child struggling with math and you had issues with math, or we are going to project all our insecurities onto them, because we don't want the child to feel the way we did. Bottom line is that's our biggest fear, because we don't know, or no one taught us how to sit with our fears. So we feel we have to protect the child from that. What if we learned how to handle those fears, how to handle the emotions? Suddenly, it's not so scary anymore. Oh, yeah, my child can do it too. That happens when we do the work. Again, everything comes back to the same thing. We start doing the work, we feel better about ourselves, we can help our child feel better about themselves, and find the meaning, the success, the joy, whatever it is for them.
I have a question. I'm thinking about empathy, because you talk about empathy and compassion in the book. And I'm thinking how I just see and hear and notice, even in my own household, how my husband and I will I think we're trying to be empathetic or compassionate. We'll be like, oh yeah, I struggled with that too. It's probably from me. Sorry. It's like we're creating a joke about it. We're trying to relate to them in that you're going to be really good at math because daddy was really good at math. Do you see how we try and do that? And what could come of that when you're constantly putting your previous struggles or identities onto your kids?
Constantly absorbing everything. Oh, and they want to be like us, right? They kind of idolize us in the starting few years and they want to be like that. So when we say things like that, oh, my daddy was good at this and I'm good at good as him or I'm good as her. That is good in a way that they find that connection with the parent. But more important is they find their own connection to themselves and find out what they are good at, irrespective of their parent being good at that or not, irrespective of the parent even knows anything about that or not. Like if you have a very musical family, but your child is not at all interested in it, but if we are constantly talking about that, suddenly we feel, and if the child is not interested in the music, they feel like they're out of place. Like something is wrong with me. My family is musical. Why am I not musical? So we have to be mindful. We can, yeah, jokingly, yeah, we make, but we have to be careful of how often, what's the intention behind it. Are we paying attention to that child who's showing abilities as we had, or are we ignoring the child who doesn't? So many things. But when we are aware, again, when we come back to that awareness in that moment, we can do all of that. Can you imagine how powerful that is when we pause? Suddenly we're aware, okay, my child is absorbing me right now. I have to be careful about what I say. He's paying attention. They might be drawing or coloring, but their ear is constantly listening to what we have to say. So when we pause, we're like, okay, I have to be careful. I know I'm musical, but you don't have to be. Let's figure out what you like. And when you're joking with your partner too, you can be very intentional about it and say, hey, we're just joking about it, things like that. We can't be too strict about these things and be aware all the time. But once you have that connection, everything just flows. We don't have to be so uptight about things. Or when we do a mistake or we didn't intend to do something, we can always circle back and say, I didn't mean to do that. That is so hard for parents to do, to say, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to. That is one of the hardest things I have seen in my coaching, to just own up. So comes back to, again, awareness, doing the work. That is where the strength comes from too. To say, yeah, I made a mistake. Let's have a do-over.
I remember when my daughter was like, I think my daughter was like 5, my oldest. And I just said one sentence to her at bedtime and it her eyes lit up. She was like, what? All they said was, we're all always working on something. I'm always working on something. And it blew her mind that we didn't have it all figured out. And so now to this day, she asks me, what are you working on now? What are you working on? And I'm like, this is my job. My job is to always be working on something and help people work on something where we all struggle with things. And I think normalizing that with our kids is really powerful, because instead of trying to be this all-powerful, all-knowing, know-it-all person that they have to answer to, like in your book, you talk about how that really strips you from your connection. The pause and finding the connection, connecting back to who they are, what they're interested in, where they're struggling, just asking for more information. You don't even have to know anything. Instead of making it about you and exploding or thinking this means something about their future, just staying in that moment. And I just want to thank you for the way you walk us through, because in this book, you really walk us through how to do that. You give examples, you talk about what you've learned in your experience as a mother. And I think that's the most powerful thing, is for us to keep sharing how we're learning, how we're doing these things, giving examples. And so I'm just so thankful that's in your book so that we can try and model it ourselves, because it's easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah. And support is important, right? Who you are surrounding yourself with is so, so important. When you have that network, or when you have a coach, when you have that neighborhood, a friend, it makes things so much easier.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about becoming allies with your kids, allies with other parents. I think that word is something that we can all strive for. And when we think about, okay, how can we become an ally versus control and change and fix and perfect, it's so freeing. So I love that idea. Where can everyone find the book?
It's on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. It's Yelling to Zenning. And
Yelling to Zenning is in Barnes & Noble. How does that feel? How's that feel, Sapna, to be in Barnes & Noble?
It's still taking time to hit me. Like, yeah, my book is in Barnes and Nobles.
Congratulations.
That's amazing, as it should be. It is life-changing. I cannot wait for all of the parents listening to this to grab this book, all the soon or future parents, even just following you if they're not a parent and they want to know more about, okay, how do I start to rewire and get this subconscious unleashed? Such a great resource. So grateful to know you, for your time. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
of course. And as you know, we have 3 segments that we finish our show with. One is our 3 gold stars. So 3 takeaways you'd like to give our listeners, whether they're kind of starting this work or they're in the midst of
Trenches.
in the trenches. Yes.
To be kind to themselves, and this has value. Whatever they're going through, that's just showing you the areas that they need to work on. That's it. Simple, not without adding too much meaning to it. It's just that we need to look into those areas. That's why it's calling attention, to be kind and take those baby steps, the small steps towards what you want, towards your goal. And that might look like, today, I'm just going to take a nap. Or today, I'm just going to wear my shoes and walk in my neighborhood or in my backyard. Those small baby steps will lead to your bigger vision of how you want your life to be.
Wonderful. And then our next segment is Unleashing Ivy. So these are just random things we're curious about. Brooke, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. I'm curious of one thing you're currently working on. Going back to that conversation of we're always working on something.
I'm working on creating more webinars and connecting to schools. I want to work a lot with schools with like kindergarten to like 5th graders maybe, because that's when their the conscious mind is not there. It's completely open. It's like whatever you're telling, it's going right into the subconscious. So catching those parents or catching those children sooner, that's what I'm working towards now.
Oh, brilliant. I love that. I love too, because you're a parenting coach, but also you work with kids too. So that combination, that's powerful. That can change generations to come.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. My question is from your book, because I was reading it and I was like, oh, this could apply to anybody. So you talk about having anger, but not being angry, having anxiety, but not being anxious. And I just want to talk about the importance of not identifying with being those things.
Yeah, that's so important. Because when we start identifying, we think we don't have power over it. And somehow we attach that emotion to our being, meaning this is how I was born and I can't do anything about it. When we separate that from us, that I'm feeling this right now and it's going to pass, and you're aware with that feeling, it goes away, it passes sooner and quicker, and we feel more in control of it without completely identifying with it. We know today I'm having this anxiety, it's going to pass, and we're going to come back to neutrality. But when we resist it, because somehow we identify with it, and we don't want that, we are pushing it down, we are not looking into those areas of our life, it lingers, it doesn't go away, it lingers in our bodies. And then we're constantly putting our effort in running away from it, avoiding it, like using your phone. Your addictions come from that. Most addictions come from that. Running away from it and avoiding, you're putting all your energy into that. But once we just separate that emotion from us, it's easier to watch it. It passes over quicker. You have more control. You can use your tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk about it being like a wave, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing like the wave's going to come. It's like with one of my kiddos yelling at me like, okay, this is happening. And it's a big wave. And it feels big. And she's feeling big. We're all feeling big. But if I just wait it out, it will come and go. It will pass. Or if it's my own feelings and emotions, knowing this is not going to consume me forever. This is a moment. And fully experience it. Like you said, if you don't, you'll get sick. If you don't, you'll have a bigger explosion later. You know, just kind of taking these waves as they come and knowing it's not a forever thing. And this is a part of being human being, that You don't always have to be happy. And you won't always be anxious, and you won't always feel this anger, but anger is a part of life. We feel angry. It doesn't mean we are an angry person if we really feel it. It's okay. And I think we're really uncomfortable with sitting in that wave.
It's a message, right? When we are angry, it's giving you a message to look at something that does not align with your values, or somebody has crossed the boundary. So these are some areas we need to, it's just a message. But when we identify and we even call that, oh, he's an angry person, or, she's an angry person, or she's always, we use those words, NLP, we catch those words. We always do this, or she always does this. We identify, then it becomes harder. We think we attach the identity to the person, then it becomes harder to separate the two.
Totally. It goes back to what we said earlier about the meaning you're giving. What's a story you're telling yourself? Your language is so powerful. Of, I'm an anxious person. If you're telling yourself that, you're going to have evidence. That's going to become your identity. And you take a step back of, is that what I want? Okay, no. So let me start changing my language. I'm experiencing right now. I'm feeling. It is not who I am. And that goes back to the pause, right? Giving yourself space to even identify what thoughts am I having.
It comes back to that. Thoughts, again. Thoughts control your emotions. And this is a huge subject. We can talk all day because the thoughts and the emotions. And it's about aligning your conscious mind to your unconscious mind, because it's so powerful. But it's like a humble servant. But we're so unaware of it. It takes over us. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating once you get into this world, and you girls know this, right? As you keep unlayering and peeling off the onion, you go to the core of it, which is your true self.
Yeah.
And it makes your connection so much deeper when you're aware of how you're speaking to yourself, how you're speaking to others, how you're projecting. And it's not, when we say work, I think sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to do more work. I'm always working, But it's the work that creates more love and peace and joy. And you might have to be the word police for a little bit. In my household, we can't say never or always or can't, because they diminish or they take away from your value. And so it's that awareness. I think the work it always starts with awareness. And especially if you ever see someone that you might want to coach with that has NLP behind their name,
do it. Well, I think even just the word work, like we're saying, how does that feel in your body? When you say I'm an anxious person, how does that feel in your body? Maybe it's rewiring or rewording. Instead of saying work, you say I am becoming more aware.
I like the word becoming.
Because work, it's like, I don't want to do another damn thing. Like, I want to relax. I want to take a nap. I don't want to work. And so how can you view that work in a different light?
I'm relaxing about the improvements I need to make on myself. Does that make sense?
No.
That doesn't work.
It's a work in progress. Oh, okay. Final question.
I'm learning new things.
I'm learning.
Learning to be aware. I'm learning to do da-da-da-da.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm improving.
Learning, improving,
I'm progressing.
becoming.
Yes. See?
My boyfriend started saying, I'm a person of increase. You heard, I think it was like an NBA player, NFL player, someone, every day they wake up and I'm a person of increase. So whatever you have to tell yourself to feel better, that's the importance, is that you're becoming aware. You are pouring into you so that you feel better. Your relationships are better. Everything is better. That is the purpose of this. And this is an invitation for you to be curious with yourself. One last piece of curiosity, Sapna, my last question for you. If you could go back and tell younger Sapna one thing, what age would you choose and what would you tell her?
Under the age of 7 or 8, I would say, you're just fine. Have more fun. But when I started going to my teen years, I wish somebody had told me, and I would say, go back and say, study psychology. The sooner you start, the better.
Learn about the subconscious.
I love it.
Yeah. I didn't know what to study. And I was like, oh, math, be an engineer, be this, which somebody had told me because I started studying later in my life. And I wish I had gone back and started way earlier, I would have had a longer line of work.
Well, then you might not have been here. You might not have created this beautiful book. And we're just happy you took the path you took and that you're still learning and that you're sharing what you're learning. I think, like I said, that's so powerful when you take your lessons as a mother, you take your lessons and the work that you've done, and that you're getting into schools, you're writing books, you're coming on podcasts. What you're doing is really valuable. And we are so thankful to know you and that now you're part of our platform so that our people have access to you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we leave our listeners with a piece of gold, a quote from you or from someone you love. Would you please leave our listeners with your quote?
I love Dr. Shefali's quote here. Love without consciousness becomes need in the name of love.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.